Hello, coaches. Welcome to iCoach Football. I'm your host, Joel Forsberg, and this channel is dedicated to helping coaches like yourself become more successful at both youth tackle and youth 7-on-7. Now, today's show was inspired by a call I got from my brother-in-law. He's going to be coaching 7-on-7 in the 7th grade for the first time. He said, what should I run? What do most people run? Do they run a zone pass coverage or do they run a man? I thought that's a great question. Maybe I'll make a video about that. So here it is. Should you run a zone or should you run a man? Well, first of all, let me tell you what I run. I run a man defense, man cover 2. I get all my guys locked up front. Why do I do that? Because I've found that over the years, the man defense is easier to teach. Zone's very hard to teach. It's very complicated because kids have to be able to make a split-second decision. I got a guy coming in my zone. Do I match onto him and lock onto him, or do I let him go and pick up this other guy that's coming in my zone? Right? They got to make really quick decisions. Zone isn't always zone. Obviously, zone is only zone until someone comes in that you're supposed to lock up on and then play them man. But that decision is hard, especially even in the high school level. That's hard to do. I just went and watched my son. He's an elite 7-on-7 team that travels around the country, and I'm watching these players. They have guys coming in. They're supposed to lock on and play that guy, but they let him go, and they jump to another guy, and the other guy's jumping over to the same guy. Guy's wide open. So just one or two bad decisions can make a guy wide open in zone. And that especially happens at the younger grades. You get a kid wide open, and you could start seeing too, if as an offensive coach, I'll see where's the weaker part of the zone. There's some weak players over here that I can take advantage of. I'm going to do that. I'm going to send my bigger, faster players over into that zone and just exploit those players. So, which really, when you're playing man coverage, one thing I like to do is I find out right away, who are their fastest players. Because there's a big difference between really fast players and really slow players in these younger grades, especially in like 7th and 8th. When you got some of the guys going through puberty, some of them aren't, and they're a lot slower and a lot smaller. So what I want to do is I want to get my stronger, faster players against their faster, stronger players, and you can do that with a man. You can do that. So I don't care. I don't have corner safeties and middle backers. I have my faster players and my medium players and my slower players. And after that first play, or I'll go watch the other team warm up or send one of my coaches, we find out right away who their better players are. And we just come out, and that's where we know, my players know who they're going to lock onto. And we get our strongest to their strongest. Now, no matter where their best players go, they're going to be matched up with my best player, right? Because now my best player can go anywhere. We're playing man coverage. He can line up if it's a running back or a tight end or a wide out. Wherever they put their best players, we're going to put our best player. Right? You can't do that in a zone. In a zone, you got your guys locked into their positions. They're playing their area, and they're kind of at the will of whoever comes into their zone. So if they take their biggest, baddest player and they bring it in to where your weakest, slower guy is, they can start picking you apart. I mean, that's what I would do. I would find out you're playing zone. Where's your weakest player? Boom, we're going to send our guy right over there. We're going to send our tallest, fastest player right into that zone. You're going to have to lock onto him, and we're going to score. We're going to just march on you. All right, so that's kind of the disadvantage of the zone, is that you have to just stay in that area. One of the advantages of zone is if you do have some big, strong, tall sprawlers that do know what they're doing, they can kind of shut down, especially the short game, because it's really hard to pass against a really disciplined zone. You basically kind of get this wall of guys. They're not turning and running. They're shifting. They're sliding. So whoever you're bringing into that zone, you know, they're dropping on and pulling off at just the right time, right? So when I say dropping on, so I mean when a guy comes in their zone, they're kind of running with them, but they're looking, and then they're letting him go to the next guy because he's going into that guy's zone, right? So if they have the discipline, if you have players that are smart enough and played together long enough to be able to take a player, run with them, and then drop them off to another player. That other player knows that he's supposed to pick him up. That it's like a dance, and the timing has to be really good. If the timing is really good, zones are hard. We played a team from Nebraska last year, and it was like a wall. I mean, it was like we couldn't pass through the thing. We had to start picking out different things, and even our like sail concepts and stuff, where we're bringing guys to try to, take advantage of these guys that weren't moving. It just wasn't happening. They were very disciplined. So if you have some really strong, tall, straddling kind of kids that can cover ground with 1 or 2 steps, it becomes intimidating to pass against a zone. But usually you're not going to have those players. So you're going to have some really smart players, some athletic players, and kind of everything in between. And you have to have a defense that can accommodate all of that. A man coverage can do that. So even if you have, say you got a player, your weakest player is on their weakest player, but their weakest player is still faster than your weakest player, and he's getting open a little bit, and they see that. You're still only going to get open a little bit. If you teach your players to run in their hip pocket, don't look back till they look back, all the different concepts, I can actually take a much slower player than the guy he's guarding and still be able to close distance. Just by not looking back. If there's separation, he's not even looking back. He's just running through. As soon as that other receiver, the receiver looks back, he's slowing down, and then closing distance, getting your hand up. All these little techniques. If you teach it right, you can take slower players and still put a lot of pressure on faster players in a man coverage. All right. In a zone coverage, you can't do that. You could take a real strong, athletic kid, but if he's not that smart and he does the wrong thing, a kid's going to get wide open. If he's reading the zone wrong and he jumps over on this kid and stays with them, it's supposed to be another kid's responsibility, and then there's guys wide open. So you'll actually see many more wide open players in a zone than you will in man. At least in man, there's somebody always on their heel, and the ball has to be really a good ball. If it's misthrown, at all, there's a great interception, possibilities. Plus, you have somebody pounding down on your heels that is right behind you. Where in a zone, if you bust a zone, guys are going to get wide open, and that happens all the time. That happened this weekend, in an elite camp. Guys just getting wide open because kids are misreading their assignments, and that's what happens in zone. So zone can work at the higher levels where you got all these really intelligent, really athletic, understanding guys that have a lot of practices together. That's the other thing. You don't get a lot of time to practice with these guys. So whatever you do, if you pick zone or man, you got to marry that in the beginning of the season, and don't try to switch out of it, because both of them take a lot of practice. To really be a good man coverage, you need to run all those drills, one-on-one drills, staying in their hip pocket, don't look back, get your hand between their hands, all these little things that really teach a player to stay like glue on their player, how to switch, how to be able to look up and see another guy coming and say switch, 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 and do the switch drill, so they're not getting caught in the traps, that teams like to run when you're playing man. So if you're playing zone, you got to work those zone drills. But whatever one you do choose, marry it in the beginning of the season. Don't try to change it. It's going to be hard enough to really get your players all on the same page, whichever way you go. So trying to switch it would be like a death sentence in the middle of the season. So that's my take on zone and man coverage. I hope that helps. As you can tell, I'm a man coverage guy, especially at the younger grades. It's going to be easier for them. You're going to have much better results right away. You can just run simpler drills. Those simpler drills that you can run that will just make them better man players, and you'll have more success with that, I believe, from all the way up through 8th grade. But there's my take. Hope that helps. Have a great season, guys, and we'll see you next time.